What's happening, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we're talking about XDefiant, the new free-to-play first-person shooter coming from Ubisoft, and right now you're watching some gameplay that I recorded on my PC earlier this week. Now, if you do want to dive into the beta, it's going on for a couple of more days. It's out on PlayStation 5, Series X, as well as PC. Now, the game is also going to be released on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as well, but the closed beta is not going to be available there. And I've been playing a good bit of this over the course of the past 7 days or so. I mean, we're talking about probably between, I'd say, 8 and 10 hours. It's about the amount of time that I've spent with the beta between the PC version and the console version. I've been checking it out on PC and Series X, and I've definitely got some thoughts. Now, I want to preface this entire video with a massive caveat. I'm not a competitive player. I'm not somebody who is going to be analyzing the dead zones on thumbsticks. I'm not somebody who's going to be talking about the difference between the stats of one gun and another or the competitive play that they've been showing off. That's not my shtick. That's not what I'm trying to do. And there are plenty of other people that can do that way better than me. Instead, I'm going to be approaching this as a jaded Call of Duty player. I'm going to be approaching this as somebody who enjoyed old school Call of Duty back in the day, and who, when I saw XDefiant, immediately thought, this looks like a game that I absolutely want to dive in and check out, and that's exactly what I've done. So I've gone old school. We've got the handy-dandy notebook here, Blue's Clues style, digging into the good, the bad, and the ugly about what I have had with XDefiant as far as my experience goes. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Starting things off right out of the gate, let's talk about some good, because first and foremost, the game plays wonderfully. It feels very, very good. And I've played a good bit on PC, a good bit on console, and I've got to say I enjoy the way the game plays on PC a little bit more, just because that mouse and keyboard gives that additional level of accuracy, and that could be said for pretty much any first-person shooter. But for XDefiant, it feels like it is especially prevalent for one reason or another. The gameplay experience itself is what really drew me into the game, because it doesn't play like Modern Warfare 2, it doesn't really play like Escape from Tarkov or any of the other big games that are out there, Apex Legends, for example. None of those games really stack up to what XDefiant is bringing, and it truly really is bringing back that old school Call of Duty feel, that run and gun arcade gameplay that made games like Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2. It's got that feel to it, and I am not mad about it. It really does capture more of an old school kind of approach to a first-person shooter as compared to the hyper-realism that even a lot of arcade games have thrown themselves into, and that also kind of bleeds over into the attachments and weapon customization system as well. That brings us right into the next point. The game is fun to play as far as customization goes, and that's a big factor in a lot of players' enjoyment of the game, because as you grind and as you play, the attachment unlock system is much more streamlined than something like a Modern Warfare 2, where you had to grind through multiple different guns, use multiple different sights and attachments to unlock everything, and it encouraged you to really push yourself to try new setups, but it also was a huge convoluted mess for a casual player like myself, who might just have a few hours a week to dive in and really experience it. So XDefiant takes out all of the tuning, it takes out all of the different ways you approach getting an attachment unlocked, and it just goes straight back to that classic system that Call of Duty had back in the day, where you spend time with a gun, you earn more XP for that gun, and then you level up from there. You'll unlock a red dot, unlock a suppressor, unlock a grip, whatever it might be. You just continue to play the game and you unlock from there. So combining those two things together, the streamlined customization and the classic feel of the game itself, you get something that's kind of like a love letter to the Call of Duty players of old. If you enjoyed those games and that kind of game back whenever, again, Modern Warfare 2 was big, Modern Warfare 3, potentially even a bit of Battlefield 3, because I think that there was a lot of Call of Duty DNA in Battlefield 3 as a game, you're probably going to dig what they're bringing with XDefiant. And of course, all of this is coming with the big bow on top that it is free to play. That brings a community on day one without having the need to go out and shell out $50, $60, or even $70 for a brand new game. So that's an instant win there. When it comes to the gameplay though, one of the core foundational elements of a good game is having good modes and good maps to play on, because any first-person shooter has iconic maps. I mean, we're talking about Modern Warfare 2 a lot. Let's bring it back to Afghan. Let's bring it back to Terminal. These are some of the most iconic experiences for people that were playing in the 2010s or even the 2000s. those maps stand out in so many players' minds. And with XDefiant, I'm not saying out of the gate there's going to be something that's on that same level of notoriety. I don't think that you can easily replicate that, and no developer should really try to hit that same level of recognition right out of the gate. But XDefiant has some really good maps and a lot of variety as well. They're very colorful. They're not hyper realistic like we see with Modern Warfare 2, where it is nitty and gritty and gray and green, but it is a little bit more vibrant. It pops a good bit. Kind of reminiscent in a way of Black Ops 3. If you go back to that one, you'll see a whole lot of color in those maps, and that's what XDefiant's bringing. It's a poppy, colorful, fun first-person shooter when it comes to the maps, and there are a good many of them. I believe in my time with the beta, I've played on 5 or 6, if I remember correctly, and that's a pretty good amount for a beta. When it comes to modes, you've got a lot of different options here as well as ranked play, so no matter what you want, there's pretty much something for everyone. You've got the typical escort stuff like you would see in Overwatch, where you're pretty much guiding a payload to its end destination where it eventually blows up. You've got domination, you've got, what's it called, Occupy, which I believe is like King of the Hill. You've got zone control, and then you've got Hotshot, which is a new mode that's coming out that basically combines Kill Confirmed with, I believe, Amped from Modern Warfare 3, if I remember correctly, where somebody is getting a ton of kills and then they just move faster through the map, they're harder to kill, and it adds an additional challenge there. So that just illustrates a picture of the variety of maps, the variety of modes, and on top of that, a pretty wide variety of guns to switch up the way you play the game and what you want to play when you do dive in. So when you get home from work after a long day and you're ready for a couple of matches of XDefiant, there's plenty of content ready and waiting for you to dive into. If you're just feeling like lighting some people up, dive into a round of domination. If you're more of an objective kind of guy, you can totally get behind that. Just a little bit of something that hits everybody's need. Another element of this game I really enjoy is the faction system, because it adds just enough complexity to make the game feel a little bit more engaging without taking away from that running and gunning Call of Duty approach that we've been talking about. And so when the game launches, there are going to be 4 different factions. You've got Wolves that are the tank class, Cleaners that are the assault class, Outcasts that are the healers, and Echelon, which is the intel class. And it's also cool, each of these are pulled from obviously different Ubisoft properties, just like the maps themselves are in the game. So it's a nice homage to the rest of the Ubisoft family. But these classes are not integral to the way you play the game. You don't have to approach it like Overwatch, where you've got to have assault, tank, healer, and support representation across the board. That's not really the case. It's good if you do, and it could turn the tide if you have really tight team cohesion or if the other team does, but it's not necessarily integral if you're just playing casual matches. You can really just choose whatever class you enjoy and run with it. A ton of people play the assault class. A ton of people play the healers class, and that's okay. But there's also fun to be had with the wolves class, the defense class, the tank class. Lots of cool options here. And so each of these factions has a passive, active, and ultimate ability, and with your active ability, you can choose what you want. So if you want to do running and gunning, you should choose the Cleaners class, for example. And the passive ability is basically your enemies catch on fire when you shoot them. That adds additional damage to the damage you do. So that could be the difference between getting a kill and them turning around and killing you while you've got to reload to finish the job. So that's a really powerful passive, and it works really well for me when I'm running the M4A1. My active ability, depending on the map, potentially the mode I'm playing or the way I want to play the game, could be the incendiary drone that basically does a little small napalm drop across a specific section of the map. Or I could use the firebomb, where if I want to just slide into a point, I can activate it, blow up, and take all the rest of the enemy team with me. Very powerful there. Then the ultimate ability is this flamethrower that's incredibly OP, where basically half a second on an enemy does the job, and you can take out a ton of people with that if you're dealing with a big crowd. And so that class is incredibly fun, and the same style approach can be found in any different class. If you want to play the Intel class, there's a stealth suit. The ultimate on the stealth class is pretty much a Splinter Cell silenced M9 that does a ton of damage, so you can really rack up some kills, and on top of that, reveal where the enemies are. But then you've got the Wolves class that has a really cool shield ability, really cool shotgun shield ultimate. Just lots of different diversity in terms of gameplay. And so it's cool if you want to approach it from the competitive side, because I think competitive play is going to be fun here, especially to watch as a viewer, to see how somebody might main the Wolves class and do really well for their team, and how their teammates its approach, them playing the Wolves class could be a game changer for the way that they win or lose a match. And so that's interesting, but it also is good for the casual players that are just diving in, because if you get bored with the Assault class, try out the Intelligence class with the Splinter Cell approach, try out the Defense class with the tank, whatever you want to do, there's an option for you, and I think that's super cool. Now let's shift into some of the bad, because this was a beta launch in its truest form. There have been plenty of issues that players have been experiencing over the course of the past week. And the first one that many players might have recognized if they dove in very early in the beta is you couldn't really play the game. And by that I mean that servers were all over the place. On console, I couldn't even play a game or matchmake until Saturday afternoon, the week that the beta launched. On PC, the issues were kind of intermittent. Sometimes you'd have issues, other times you wouldn't, depending on when you played. Maybe the player count had an issue, but they did issue a couple of patches out on console and PC that have addressed that issue. So the big takeaway is, I'm glad this happened during the beta. I'm glad it wasn't during the actual launch weekend. Fingers crossed that will end up going well, but it was still a negative first impression, and so it was a bummer to see that. In addition to this, custom loadouts weren't saving for the majority of the beta for a lot of players, including myself. And I believe that a patch went out today, 420, to fix that, but the way that it worked is that every time you loaded into a match, unless you got lucky, because I know this wasn't happening to all players, but for the majority of people, once you loaded into a match, you had to literally rebuild your entire custom class. So just to reiterate, that's a primary weapon, a secondary weapon, equipment, and then all of the attachments for the primary and secondary weapons. So if you have a very complex assault rifle setup, you've got to go in the 15 or 20 seconds before the match starts and rebuild that every time. So the result of that is you pretty much either stuck with one custom class that you rebuilt at the beginning of every match, or a handful of small custom classes. Maybe you were like me and you looked up a build guide online of a really good gun, or you relied on the preset classes, which aren't great, aren't terrible, they're just kind of there, and they give you a pretty good easy in for the game with customized weapons without the need to go in at the beginning of every match. And so this kind of limits your discoverability, your ability to experiment with different kinds of builds and loadouts. But like I said, today a patch has gone out that supposedly fixed that, so again, a good finding from the team, and it's great to see that they're finally on the right track. So that's a win altogether all around. The other big takeaway for me, and again, this is a nitpick and it's probably just a beta issue, but there is a free battle pass that comes with the beta. And once you dive in, it's got, I believe, 10 tiers of content you can save and carry over into the final version of the game when it launches. That is some of the slowest progression I've seen in my life, or at least since Halo Infinite launched a couple of years ago. Like I said, I've probably been playing for between 8 and 10 hours right now. I haven't even hit level 4. Do you see the issue? And so that's something that I think is a big issue in and of itself, is that they've got to figure out what the progression looks like for the final build, because if I spend 50 hours in the course of a month in a free-to-play first-person shooter, I need to be able to get some rewards for that, and right now it's not feeling as rewarding as it could. And it also didn't help the fact that the progression system was broken for the majority of the first week of the beta itself, which ultimately resulted in them also unlocking all of the guns and all of the attachments for all the players in the game. So there isn't really anything we were grinding other than the battle pass itself, which I'm not even sure. Maybe progression tracking is impacting that as well. That could also be a big part of the issue. Like I said at the start of this video, I am not a competitive player, so a lot of the more intricate gameplay issues that people might have are probably way better addressed by a competitive Call of Duty player or Apex Legends player that might be diving into XDefiant to give it a shot. It's just not my cup of tea, and I don't want to pretend like it is. But with that being said, skill-based matchmaking is not present in XDefiant. Thank you, because as a casual player, like I mentioned, I don't want to sweat when I get home from work. I don't want to have to grind every single night to try and hold a positive KD on the leaderboard. I love a good challenge, and I respect the fact that people that are on my same skill level should be placed in my lobby, but at the same time, I also love wrecking noobs. I love really getting in there and just having a good time with randomized lobbies. You know, we always used to talk about it back whenever Call of Duty was really at its peak, which I would consider to be like 2009, 2010. Whenever Christmas rolled around, you knew those lobbies were going to be overflowing with Christmas noobs, and with skill-based matchmaking in the last couple of games, what ultimately ends up happening is you keep going with the people that play just as much as you do, whereas the newer players get matched with each other, so everything kind of evens out across the board, but one group isn't better than the other. Could be good, could be bad, depending on what you think, but ultimately I like going in and feeling like I've got some power, feeling like I've kind of earned my keep, and I really have to go in there and show people who's boss. XDefiant does that for me, and I don't feel like, once again, I have to sweat 24/7. That's a big win. Now, if you do want to sweat, they have added Ranked going into Weekend 2, and so Ranked, right out of the gate, seemed like a great addition. They had some issues. The MMR, the ranking system, did not feel like it was tuned properly, and so XDefiant on Twitter reacted almost immediately, saying, "We hear you, we appreciate your feedback, we are going to reactivate Unranked while we work on these issues, but we're leaving Ranked active as well, so if you do want to dive in, you do want that competitive feel, you can go in and feel how Ranked is going to be, and then we'll work on that, and you can also play Unranked if you don't want that." Massive win. Which brings us to the chaser of this entire conversation. In the past 5+ years, I have rarely, if ever, seen community management that's as strong as what we have right now for XDefiant. You've got Ubisoft reps, you've got XDefiant. By the way, people say I say Ubisoft weird. Let me know down below, do I say Ubisoft weird? Is it Ubisoft? I've said it both ways, and I got corrected one time, and I've just stuck with it. Either way, Ubisoft, Ubi, whatever, they've been all over Twitter sharing that they are listening to feedback, making changes to the game, almost immediately, putting out multiple patches for a closed beta. They are really trying to make sure that players have a good experience with this game. They're genuinely passionate about this, and that's refreshing to see. It's something I don't feel like we see as often as we probably should in the gaming industry, and that's not throwing shade at, as we've been saying, Call of Duty necessarily, or any other kind of first-person shooter, but for a AAA developer to be putting out a massive free-to-play game, it is really nice to see it getting the same amount of attention as it feels like an indie game would that's getting a lot of success. It really does have that same personal level of feeling, or that same personal touch, and I really appreciate that. And so as somebody who, again, is a casual fan going in XDefiant, who has wins and losses coming out of this beta weekend, the biggest win on my list is the community management. The biggest win on my list is their reaction time, is their listening ability. The feedback that's being given is truly being received. And that is unfortunately rare in 2023, and it's really nice to see it being leveraged, and the community appreciates it as well. It's been a hot minute since I've seen positivity on the same level as XDefiant is getting. Not to say there aren't issues, and not to say people aren't frustrated by some aspects, but at least there is a conversation being had. It's not just us yelling into an echo chamber or a Reddit thread existing in perpetuity. People are really out there listening to what we have to say, and that feels really good. So those are my thoughts coming out of the closed beta for XDefiant. And again, I'm a casual fan who just enjoys playing a good shooter game, and so far we've got a pretty game that runs well, that had issues, but that have been largely worked out to create something that feels like a really fun first-person shooter. Now, going forward, will monetization be fair? Big pending option there. Will the battle pass be engaging? Will progression get fixed? Will people play the game? Is it going to have a long-term community? These are still outstanding questions that won't be answered until time takes its course and we eventually get the game and see how players respond. But what I will end on is that the elements are there for XDefiant to be a really successful first-person shooter. I would love to see it make a big splash in the competitive scene. If they did it with Rainbow Six Siege, I could see it coming out in the arcade capacity with XDefiant. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Would love to see that, would love to see it on the casual scene as well. Blow this up as much as a Call of Duty mobile, potentially. I don't think it's going to compete with Modern Warfare 2, but it could still be something that earns a piece of the pie. That's what I would love to see. Of course, as always, I would love to know your thoughts if you've had time to go hands-on with the beta, or potentially if you've even just checked out some gameplay. Does it look good? Do you enjoy what you're seeing here from my gameplay? That, again, probably mediocre compared to what a lot of you are seeing out there. But is it going to be something that could legitimately compete with the Call of Duty? Could it be doing its own thing? Or do you think it's not going to make much of a splash at all? I'd love to know your thoughts down below. But hey, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you guys for checking it out. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Until then, keep on playing.